Thank you all for attending the funeral of my late wife. She was my beloved wife.
My husband, Mark, stood as the bereaved, holding a framed photo of a woman I didn't know. I stood there, blending in with the crowd of attendees, staring at him in stunned disbelief. A part of me knew I couldn't make a scene here, but another part of me wanted to confront Mark immediately. Without thinking, I started walking toward him. Before I could reach him, a man in the crowd stopped me and asked what my connection to the deceased was. My connection to her, just like her. I was in a relationship with him that I couldn't escape from until the end. I'm Michelle Parker, a 46-year-old housewife working part-time as a library assistant. I've been married to my husband, Mark, for 22 years. We have 2 kids. Our son, Bob, is a sophomore in college, and our daughter is in high school. I met Mark 24 years ago when we were both working at the same company as new hires. Back then, I didn't have much experience working part-time during school, so I struggled to keep up at work and often heard people talking behind my back about how slow I was. But Mark was different. He always helped me out and gave me great advice on how to work more efficiently. I developed feelings for him and eventually confessed, which led to us dating for a year before we got married. After I became pregnant with Bob, I quit my job, and Mark took on the role of the family breadwinner. In return, I supported him by working part-time while raising the kids. We've never had any major arguments in our marriage, to the point where our kids are even surprised and wonder if we've ever fought at all. However, I believe that's because even when I was shocked by Mark's lighthearted, teasing comments, I always considered them trivial and made sure not to let things escalate into an argument. I had made up my mind never to argue in front of the kids, and having grown up with a strict father who ruled the house, I had naturally developed the habit of suppressing my feelings. But even I once seriously protested to Mark. It was our 5th year of marriage. Mark reunited with his first love at a reunion, and then he told me something.
Why don't you dress up more like her?
At the time, I was caring for a 3-year-old boy and a baby, so I had no time for myself, and being compared to a woman who was clearly special to him as his first love honestly didn't sit well with me. I had never argued with Mark before, but I was truly angry that time. After that, he never brought up his first love again, but when he got drunk, Mark would occasionally mutter the name Nancy in his sleep. That woman, Nancy, was likely his first love. She must have been an important figure in his life. Her name has since been etched into my memory. Nowadays, Bob has already moved out and is living on his own, and our daughter is busy preparing for her college, commuting between home and school. We had never experienced our family being so scattered like this before, so at first, I did feel a bit lonely. But it's a good thing that the kids have grown up safely to the age where they're ready to leave home. I work as well, so I only get to spend time with Mark in the evenings and on weekends, but we lead a calm and peaceful life. Around that time, my dad passed away. He was 75 years old. Although I had somewhat prepared myself since he'd been in and out of the hospital for about 3 years, it still happened suddenly. I mostly remembered him as a strict man who lorded over my mom, but he was also the one who raised me without any financial struggles all the way through college. Even though it was a sudden goodbye, we were able to send him off in a quiet and dignified manner, surrounded by family. Right after losing my dad, I became busy with various formalities, but I inherited a substantial amount of money. I didn't tell Mark the exact amount, but he likely had a good idea. Since then, I started noticing subtle changes in Mark's behavior. He began wearing more brand name items and started asking me for money. I hadn't used any of the money my dad left behind, but I could see that if this continued, I might have no choice. You're doing a lot of shopping lately, but don't you think you could find something nice without spending so much?
Are you telling me, as a department manager, to wear cheaper things than my junior colleagues?
That's not what I'm saying, but I just want you to think a bit more about how you spend money. We still have a child getting ready for college, you know?
Stop nagging. It's not like we're struggling financially.
It's not about struggling or not.
Enough. I don't even want to talk to you anymore. I'm leaving for a while, so think about that.
With that, Mark stormed out of the house. I was shocked to see this side of him for the first time, but the inheritance wasn't meant for buying luxury items. I wanted to use the money for our children. That was likely my late dad's wish as well. I believed that once Mark had a chance to cool off, he would return to his usual self. Around that time, Mark's business trips started to increase rapidly. He often came home late, and sometimes I even wondered if he was avoiding me. I don't regret not giving in and handing him the money back then, but maybe I could have chosen my words more carefully. One day, when I was thinking about setting aside some time to have a serious talk with Mark, I found him rummaging through my dresser after coming back from a trip. "What are you doing?"
I'm looking for the bank card.
So, I handed him it I usually use, and he silently took it and left the house again. Is he still angry? With that awkward atmosphere lingering, another 3 months passed. That day, I was off work, and Bob had come home for a visit. I decided to ask Mark if he wanted to go out for a change. Then, Mark looked around nervously and came out of the room. On impulse, I hid so he wouldn't see me. I can't explain why I did it, but it just felt like I had to. Mark quietly left the house, carrying a suit covered in plastic. When I peeked into the room, I noticed that his black suit and tie were missing from the rack where Mark usually hung his suits. I haven't heard anything about a funeral, and there's no reason for him to sneak out like this. Feeling suspicious, I told Bob what was going on, and we decided to follow Mark. Thankfully, Mark's phone had a location app on it. Normally, I wouldn't pay much attention to it, but this time, it came in handy. After driving for 2 hours, we arrived at a funeral home. The deceased shared the same last name as us, Parker. I didn't hear anything about a relative passing away. With that thought, we parked the car and got out. Apparently, the deceased woman had just remarried 3 months ago. Hearing people around us whispering, "What a shame," made me feel uneasy. I thought that if it was one of Mark's relatives, I could offer flowers after the ceremony, but then Bob tapped me on the shoulder. What I saw next was unbelievable. Mark was standing in front of a microphone, holding a framed photo of the deceased and beginning his speech as the bereaved husband.
Thank you all for attending the funeral of my late wife, Nancy. Although we had only recently remarried, she was my beloved wife, and that will never change.
As I stood there in shock, listening to Mark's words, our eyes met. He stared at me and Bob as if he'd seen a ghost, hurriedly finishing his speech as the bereaved. The woman holding the framed photo of the deceased noticed his strange behavior and then glanced over at us. I wanted to confront Mark right then and there. But I also knew this wasn't the place to do something like that. I tried hard to suppress my feelings. However, despite my efforts, my body started moving toward Mark on its own. At that moment, a man grabbed my arm. He introduced himself as Kevin, the husband of the woman holding the photo. Given that Bob and I were dressed in casual clothes at the funeral, he must have found us suspicious. He asked about my connection to the deceased. Slightly agitated, I told Kevin that I was the wife of the man who had just given the speech. People nearby overheard my words and murmured among themselves, and Kevin also gave me a puzzled look. But I didn't know how else to explain the situation. Kevin led us to a waiting room at the funeral home.
Please wait here until the service is over,
he said before leaving. The staff kept glancing at us, and Bob, sitting beside me, made no effort to hide his irritation. Feeling uncomfortable, I focused on trying to make sense of everything. In the waiting room, there was a photo of a woman displayed. She was someone I didn't recognize. However, the name Nancy rang a bell. It was the same name as Mark's first love. And without a doubt, the person who gave the speech was my husband, Mark. After being married to him for 22 years, there was no mistaking him. So how could he be married to the deceased? It wasn't possible for him to be married to two people, but surely no one would allow someone who wasn't the spouse to act as the bereaved. An hour had passed since we were taken to the waiting room. With time, I regained some composure. No matter what was about to unfold, I knew this was not the place for a confrontation. Just as I was thinking about all of this, Mark was dragged into the waiting room by Kevin. Mark glanced at us briefly, then turned away. I'm sorry for causing a scene at such a time. I apologized to the woman holding the photo and a few other attendees. No matter the circumstances, I had nearly ruined the final moments with the deceased. The woman gave me a polite greeting.
I'm Sarah, Nancy's older sister. May I ask what your relationship is with Mark?
I'm Mark's wife.
Wife? Mark's wife is my sister, Nancy.
No, I'm his legal wife.
She's my ex-wife.
Mark said, still looking away. What are you talking about?
Shut up. Don't come here spouting nonsense.
You're the one talking nonsense.
We've been divorced for a long time.
Mark's words left me stunned. I never got divorced.
I haven't heard anything about my parents getting divorced.
We probably didn't have any allies here. However, if things continued like this, we'd just look like people who crashed the funeral of his second wife, making outrageous claims. I couldn't let things play out the way Mark intended.
We've all been told, including Nancy, that Mark divorced you. I even signed as a witness on their marriage certificate 3 months ago, and Nancy was happy to be Mark's wife.
Sarah's words left us speechless. Mark and Nancy got married. I never signed any divorce papers, nor did I file anything with the authorities.
However, I've noticed something strange about Mark's behavior today. That's why I want to hear what you have to say.
Sarah, don't believe a word these people are saying. They're lying.
I'll decide whether it's a lie after hearing her side of the story.
Sarah replied, turning her gaze back to me. Desperately, I explained how I had followed Mark after his suspicious behavior and that I had no memory of ever getting divorced. But if you ask for proof, the only identification I have on me is my driver's license.
Then just give it up and go home.
Mark sneered, opening the door and gesturing for me to leave. There must be some way to turn this situation around. I started thinking of a way to regain control. That's it. If you say you've submitted divorce papers and we're no longer married, then that means a forged document was filed, right? So, I should just file a police report and have them investigate.
What?
Forgery of a private document. And wasn't it also the use of a forged document? If they find out it was forged, you'll be arrested.
What are you talking about?
There's no other way to verify the official documents that were submitted, right?
You're right. To settle this, that's the surest way.
Then, I'll go ahead and begin the procedure. I apologize for causing such a scene during this difficult time. I handed Sarah a note with my contact information.
I'll be waiting for your update.
Wait a minute. What happens if they find out I forged the divorce papers?
Probably 3 months to 5 years in prison. But if you didn't forge anything, you've got nothing to worry about, right?
What? No, don't do this. After Nancy's mourning period, I was planning to remarry you.
What? You were just accusing us of spreading lies.
It's fine if we go back to being husband and wife, right? Let's talk this over calmly, okay?
Do you even realize what you're saying? Not only are you insulting me, but you're also disrespecting the memory of Nancy.
No. What's going to happen to me?
I'm just going to do what I need to do. Whatever the truth turns out to be, I doubt it will work against me. With that, I left the funeral home. I could hear people criticizing Mark behind me, but from here on, this was something his current family would have to deal with. After I filed a police report and they conducted an investigation, it was revealed that the divorce papers had been forged. I was able to file a civil lawsuit and prove that the divorce was invalid. At the same time, Mark's marriage to Nancy was also declared null and void. However, there was no way I could continue living as Mark's wife after all of this. I filled out and officially submitted new divorce papers. Now truly my ex-husband, Mark, was arrested and prosecuted, losing not only his family, but also his position at work. He didn't want our divorce to become public because he couldn't let go of the inheritance from my late dad, and it turned out his marriage to Nancy was motivated by her inheritance as well. 6 months ago, when he learned that Nancy's health was declining, he lied to her about being single and proposed. I heard that Nancy, who considered Mark her first love, was overjoyed to finally marry him. Knowing that he'd trampled over both her feelings and his own memories of his first love just for money, I made sure to pursue Mark relentlessly. Nancy's family apologized to me for being rude at that time, but they are also victims. Now I live with my daughter. Bob, perhaps concerned about the fact that the household is now just women, has been visiting more frequently. I'm not yet able to laugh about what happened with Mark, but the time I spend with my grown children is more fulfilling than ever before.